Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members may recall that this council approved the revised gambling licensing policy statement on December the 17th last year. At that time, I did warn members that the Gambling Commission had issued revised guidance that introduced a number of changes that required us to further review our gambling licensing policy statement. This revised policy was subject to a period of public consultation between April the 1st and May the 20th this year. The Licensing Committee reviewed the policy at its meetings on April the 6th and July the 19th. At the July 19th Licensing Committee recommended a number of matters be revised, including guidance in relation to other vulnerable persons, as well as covering child sexual exploitation. This has been done. The Cabinet approved the revised policy at this meeting on September the 8th, and I recommend it to full council.
Councillor Moore. I have no indication of anybody. Sorry. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the member has already stated, the review which has given rise to the adoption of the revised Gambling Act statement of licensing policy is, of course, a legal requirement which must be made every 3 years. Although it is less than a year since the last policy statement took effect, changes to the law in April of this year necessitated a further review, as he has outlined, and the particular areas of review, especially including local risk factors, as related to children, areas of deprivation, local crime rates, addictive gambling and vulnerable persons. And this is indeed a welcome change to the law. I was pleased to learn that the Council consulted widely with a range of consultees. In particular, it's good that organisations such as Gamblers Anonymous and the Essex County Council Child Protection Team were involved, as they are well placed to advise on these matters. As the Cabinet member has indicated, the Licensing Committee, of which I am Vice Chairman, also gave consideration to the revised policy statement in July. The policy rightly identifies the power of the Council in considering an application to have regard to the number of betting shops in a given area so as to avoid saturation, and to strengthen arguments against gambling premises applications in those areas considered as at risk to the exploitation of the vulnerable within close proximity to such premises. It is also worth noting that betting shops are no longer classified as A2 for planning purposes, so that specific permission for a change of use to a betting shop is required. The Council will need to be proactive to ensure that the objectives it has determined are encouraged and enforced. There will need to be close supervision of the training of gambling premises staff in their responsibilities towards vulnerable people and children to avoid this policy being a mere set of platitudes. The use of conditions such as the requirement to have door supervisors in some cases can be a useful tool in maintaining good control. We welcome the strengthening of the Act with the introduction of a new requirement for certain gambling operatives to assess the local risk, including whether the premises is in an area of deprivation. Each locality within the Basildon Borough has its own character and challenges, and with the advent of local area profiling, this should help assist applicants and the Council in determining the avoidance of risks to our residents. We will therefore be supporting the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you. Although this makes for an interesting and thorough report, I find that I am unable to support it. It may be legal, it may be allowed or within guidelines, but I cannot abide the fact that cash dispensing ATMs are allowed to be installed in gambling premises of any kind. Addictive gambling is an illness, a mental addiction just as strong as drug addiction. Having an ATM fireproof from a machine is not responsible behaviour for a licensed premise or for a council. Somebody can end up spending far more than they intended to and gamble away rent money or bill payment money, or end up in serious debt. And more often than not, it's the people that don't have that the most, that are those that don't have the most money to spare. And yet, throughout the report, I see that ATMs are permitted with a caveat that we may place restrictions. ATMs need to be removed from gambling venues and banned from them altogether. If a gambler leaves the venue to try to get money, there is more chance that they will go home instead of feeding their addiction. Until the council gambling policy bans ATMs from venues, I shall not be voting for it. The wording must read, banned from venues. Until then, I shall vote against. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Davis.
Well, I think it's a moral question as well. I mean, I agree. Actually, I'd rather have no betting shops, but that's my personal choice morally. However, I think we have to be sensible about the structures that are in place. Actually, having a policy in place, having the discretion is important. I think in the real world, the danger is not gaming shops, betting shops, where there are people, interaction, and training of staff, understanding people's limits and seeing vulnerability. The danger in society is the remote gaming, the gaming at home on the internet, where there are people around and you can use a debit card. You've got a cash machine at your home. That's what my concern is. The gaming shops can be regulated. It's no different to an on-premises like a pub. You can manage it. There's still dangers. It's when the people are buying alcohol, going home, consuming it with no supervision. So I think one has to put it into perspective always. In society, people choose to gamble, some people choose to drink, some people do things which are not good for their health. And it's about getting that balance. Helping those that are perhaps addicted, need help, and trying to get a balance. So I'm with you. I'd rather have no gaming shops. My concern is that we need a policy. We need to make sure we manage it. I'm sure the licensing subcommittees will manage each application as they go through, and I hope that we get applications with responsible operators. My big concern is the game board goes online or at home.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I've got one further speaker, Councillor Baggett, then I'll ask Councillor Moore to...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I suppose I should have declared an interest earlier because I have been known to pop into corals from time to time. I think the thing is, when we talk about ATMs, is there is an element of self-policing there anyway. Because anybody that has a credit card where they can access cash are unable to take above a certain limit anyway. So having an ATM or not in a gambling establishment is a bit of a red herring. If you've only got the ability to draw out so much money in a day, you're not going to exceed the amount. What I think is more relevant is a lot of gaming establishments now, and Corals is an example, actually encourage you to have a card whereby you can access all of your funds without that ability to have a limit. And I think the question that, from a council point of view, we should be asking and addressing is that staff in establishments are properly trained, properly cognizant of the abuse of the ability to drain your account in a card that doesn't have that limit, rather than an issue to an ATM. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baggett. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'd like to thank Councillor Ferguson for his support of the policy. Councillor Davis actually re-ran his arguments from December last year about ATMs. As far as I'm aware, legislation allows ATMs, so I guess he ought to lobby government to change the legislation. Councillor Daggs was quite right in saying that we need a policy in which we can manage the gambling in the borough, and Councillor Baggett, I understand, is actually thinking of buying shares in Corals. He's in there so often. So I would go to the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Right, we go to the recommendation on page 11 that the Gambling Act 2005 Statement of Licensing Policy as set out in enclosure 2 be approved for publication. All those in favour, please show. Just keep your hands up for the moment because the officers are checking. Okay? All those against?
Oh no, it wasn't me.
I
Put my hand down.
How
I'm
many
sorry.
times you voted?
I voted for yes, not no.
Those against? Right, abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. Item 8, the Treasury Management Annual Report Credential Indicators 2015-16. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report has already been through the Audit and Risk Committee on the 28th of July and Cabinet on the 8th of September. This is the annual report for financial year 2015-16. It comments on Treasury management activity in the context of the strategy. All Treasury management activity was carried out within the strategy approved by the Council, and none of the Treasury management indicators were breached during the year. The Council held significant cash balances during the year. This was a product of many factors, the two most significant of which were the retention of reserves and undertaking £20 million of borrowing in the last quarter of the year to take advantage of the historically low rates available at that time. This has resulted in interest earned, the sum of £263,000 for the year, which was against a budget target of £29,000. At 31st March 2016, gross debt equaled 220.7 million, net debt 151.2 million, which means that over the year, net debt reduced by 1.7 million. Those are the highlights of the report, Mr. Mayor, so if anyone would like to debate those, I'm happy to go in.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Treasury Management Annual Report was one of the first financial reports to come to the Audit and Risk Committee with myself as the new chair. And it was my pleasure to receive the report into the first extended session of the committee. Treasury management can be considered a high-risk activity due to the current volatility in markets. Therefore, it's reassuring to see that the risk management controls in place ensure that Basildon Borough Council operate at a low risk. The committee noted that the Treasury strategy allowed the Treasury team to take advantage of market conditions to secure early funding for 2016-17 at a preferential rate. This has not only saved Basildon Borough Council thousands in future interest payments, but did allow for increased investment income during 2015-16. I think that we would all agree that in this time of austerity, every marginal gain will prove essential in the years to come. I would like to thank officers and relevant staff in the Treasury Department for continued professional excellence in performing their duties. It would also be appropriate for me to mention that I recently attended a meeting at the SIPA headquarters in London. During the proceedings, it was acknowledged that the new robust approach of the Audit and Risk Committee and the working group programme set up under my chairmanship was held up as a benchmark for other authorities, Audit and Risk Committees to aspire to as best practice. I therefore extend my thanks to all those involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, because that scrutiny committee has only just happened under Councillor Cannon. How ludicrous. Mr. Mayor, these officers sometimes come in for stick with council services, and very often something that's done as the Treasury management policy can go amiss in terms of thanking the officers for that dedicated work. Now, Councillor Cannon doesn't even come close when he starts thanking officers for the work they're doing, because it actually goes much deeper than just making money on reserves. When you look at the financial risks that we're held up to, and members will remember that we're here, the Iceland scandal, where other authorities were in hock for quite a substantial amount. That was averted in Basildon because of the diligence of officers. Now, if you have a look at the amount of turnover that comes through the council's hands, all of that money has to be managed in a professional way, with good governance, and that's what this policy does. And it is testament to the Chief Executive and his staff, where all of those policies come together to protect the resident. And that's what this is all about. The resident should know, and I think if the resident was here tonight, they would absolutely be overjoyed and full of glee to know that the council officers in the back rooms behind us are managing their finances, their money, to such a good extent that we can make nearly 7 times the amount that we were targeting. Going forward, it's going to become even more important. We are in times of austerity. Our council tax is reducing, or the government grant that we get is reducing, and we're going to have to find different ways of generating revenue, and that's already started with a conservative policy of going out and actually investing in our communities, such as buying a substantial chunk of the town centre. Now again, all of that comes under the governance of this policy, because the revenue generated there will have to be managed in an appropriate way. So it's easy to pass this report over as saying, oh yeah, that's just normal business. No, it isn't normal business. It's good business, it's good practice, and it's good practice by this administration and certainly by officers that we find ourselves in such good financial health. I think going one step further in praising the officers is that you have to look at where other authorities get it wrong, then compare Basildon. We have always been prudently and financially well managed, and that I very much believe we will keep doing that in the future to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Burke-Sands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I too am a member of the Audit and Risk Committee and was asked to note this report on the 28th of July. I've had time to consider some elements further. And I do agree there's some good in the report, and the officers should be commended for a lot of the work they're doing. However, as we've mentioned, we are in times of economic uncertainty, Mr. Mayor. As we enter a period where we exit the European Union, and let's be frank, none of us in this room, from the Prime Minister down to the man and woman on the street, really have a clue what that's going to look like. The impact of such uncertain times could demand significant changes in direction in terms of Treasury management, as markets react to our country's decisions and actions. In my view, such changes of strategy should not be left purely to the Section 151 officer under delegated powers, as stated in the report. Important decisions such as this, that will ultimately affect every resident in this borough, should be brought before full council. I'm therefore hesitant to commend delegations of powers at this level. I also note that the general fund effectively lent to the housing revenue account to maintain its balance, and that the HRA will be charging an appropriate rate of interest. Whilst I appreciate it can be prudent and right to temporarily move funds from one account to another on a short-term basis to fulfil a funding gap, I do find it odd that one council fund will be paying interest to another, given the current economic challenges we now face. The overall saving by avoiding external short-term borrowing, which this does achieve, must surely be a benefit to the council coffers overall. To me, this is a major concern and shows an unnecessary consequence of separating the general fund and the HRA. Finally, when viewing the borrowing dashboard, I do have to question some of the figures we've just been given. I reviewed this report and last year's report and noticed that our borrowing as an authority is steadily increasing year on year. And interestingly, borrowing in the final 2 months of the year on both occasions increased. We entered financial year 2014-15, Mr. Mayor, with a total borrowing figure of £187.55 million. We finished the year with an increase of 17 million, leaving us with a debt balance of 204.55 million. We finished 2015-16 up a further 10 million, giving us an outstanding debt of 214.55 million. We have heard many times in this chamber, even tonight, about the prudence of the Tories and how they're fixing Labour's mess. Austerity enforced upon us to bring the deficit down. An increase of 14% borrowing in over a 2-year period, to me, by this council, doesn't represent financial prudence. perhaps time for certain members to stop mudslinging this way and start looking in the mirror. I hope our strategy as a council moving forward will be reflective of the challenges we're about to face, and I do hope members will be kept fully abreast of our position as a council. It will be beneficial to see the report produced by the council's solicitor after due consideration is given to the consequences of Brexit, and she has concluded her initial impact assessment. For that great reason, Labour believes this is not appropriate to support this report this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. One more speaker, Councillor Baggott, then I'll ask Councillor Sullivan to wind up.
Thank you, Chairman. I made some notes and then Councillor Burton Sampson threw me for a loop. I'd like to start off having once upon a time been chair of audit and risk and endorse what other colleagues have said about the professionalism of officers and how well they did. I'm less likely to look at audit and risk in glowing terms that Councillor Callum said, though, because having looked at the minutes from what can pass, were I to have been there, the sort of challenges I think that officers are currently facing in austerity is the fact that the current rate of interest that we're looking at across the board is 0.05%. You've got NatWest that have already said on business accounts that they are prepared to go into negative equity, which means that they will charge businesses for actually holding money. We've got corporate bond rates now eclipsing gilt yield rates, and gilt yields are at a 30-year low. So officers are really, really challenged with regards to what they actually do and how they actually address the funding of the council. And I take my hat off to them for professionalism. And this is where Councillor Burton Sampson's suggestion that such a thing is brought to council just fills me with horror where his head's at. He clearly doesn't agree with Councillor Cannon's glowing a testimony of what the Audit Risk Committee are doing, because he's just trashed the report that was taken to them. I wonder how many councillors here could actually articulate the difference between a corporate bond and a junk bond. I wonder how many councillors here actually know what the running 5-year gilt yield is. And yet he would suggest that we, who have no knowledge of this thing, make decisions about the prudential borrowing and how the council's run. I think that's just madness piled upon madness. I think we have to reflect that we're elected to actually represent our residents and to challenge. We're not elected to be the experts and try and second guess our officers. So I absolutely do support this, and I definitely don't support Councillor Burton Sampson's suggestions.
Thank you, Councillor Baggott. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start by thanking Councillor Callum for his support for this report, and also reflecting Councillor Turner's comments on the diligence and ability of the officers, which I completely agree, and I think we should all not take for granted. Then it comes to Councillor Burton Sampson, and well, the level of lack of understanding was quite staggering. The Section 151 officer has powers prescribed by legislation. We can't just take those powers away from them. We cannot not charge interest when we're moving funds from general fund to the HRA, because that would be regarded as a subsidy. So we cannot just not charge interest on those sorts of things. General fund and HRA must be kept separate. The debt has increased because we've been taking advantage of the low interest rates, and I find that remarkable from someone who's in a party whose leader wants to borrow £500 billion. And then he's complaining about us taking advantage of the low interest rates for capital investment. And as Councillor Baggott actually alluded to as well, we cannot bring these sorts of decisions to full council, and if Councillor Burton Sampson is the level of understanding, then I think it's vital that we don't bring that to full council. It must be dealt with by the experts. And also about voting against this, isn't it just worth noting anyway, so I'm not sure we're actually voting for it. And so, other than that, I think, as I said, I've mentioned Councillor backed up my point. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll leave the rest up to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. The recommendation is that the annual report on Treasury management activities and their prudential indicators of 2015-16 be noted, because it's a report. So but we can take a vote on noting it. I've just been advised this. We'll have a vote. It's been received and noted. All those in favour, please show. Somebody will vote against. Hang on. Right. All those against, please show. Abstentions.
I think it is right that we should be told what those. We used to get announced by Helen. It doesn't get announced. I can't see where.
No, it's unanimous.
Helen has done that.
Are you doing item 9?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I move that, please? Thank you.
You moved it. Move the recommendation. No one wishes to speak? Councillor Ward. Councillor Ward. You need a microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Preamble to the report states the Local Income Act 2011 requires councils to appoint one or more independent persons to participate in council standards arrangements to represent the public viewpoint and thereby the working. The most important issue here is local authority needs to be open, demonstrate openness and transparency in all our dealings to promote public confidence. To demonstrate our commitment to openness and transparency, I believe that the independent persons should be replaced every 4 years. For this reason, I recommend to the Council that we do indeed and appoint new independent persons in the roles to be advertised in the local paper and then shortlisted by the Employment and General Purpose Committee before coming to the Council for approval. In this regard, I'd like to emphasise that my recommendation is not levelled at our existing 4 independent persons who have served us well with due diligence for the last 4 years. To whom
Are you moving an amendment? Can you tell me know what the amendment is first of all, so people know what you're talking to? Is it to be? I haven't got a copy. Hang on a sec. No, I need to have a copy in writing according to the standing orders. Save time, can I read it out? It's very short. But it does say as long as I've got a copy and I have got a copy.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, point of order, shouldn't it be moved first?
Yeah, I was going to read it out so you understood what he was moving. Because it's different to what he just said. That the council reappoints, to replace recommendation 1 with that the council reappoints the 4 independent persons on the Joint Standards Committee for the remainder of this municipal year and undertakes to recruit 4 new independent persons for a 4-year term. Who will second that? Councillor Paul College.
The second issue relates to the requirement for training for committee membership. It is, of course, best practice for members on certain committees to have received appropriate training to the second recommendation that has been extended to the Employment and General Purposes Committee when determining employment matters. Finally, as Chairman of the Joint Standards Committee, and in accordance with best practice, I believe it's timely to conduct this, that it is time and timely to conduct a review of the standards to make sure we indeed maintain the highest processes and levels of standards, and to negate any accusations of whitewashers being levelled at the committee. I therefore intend to progress to the review through the committee of scrutiny.
Councillor Walker, hold you second. Did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really have anything further to add to that. Basically, the recommendation is that we do advertise for 4 new independent persons through the processes outlined in the report before you tonight. And as the Deputy Mayor has said, basically we would like to extend our sincere thanks to the existing 4 independent persons. Their assistance and help and integrity is very much appreciated. This is just basically to make sure that this organisation is above reproach with regards to being open and transparent. Thank you.
Councillor Dance.
Well, I mean, I've never heard it before. In essence, she's saying, we don't want you anymore. Independent, go away. Well, thank you very much for all your efforts, but you know what? We want 4 more independent. I mean, I've never heard such a ridiculous argument. The whole purpose of Localism Act was to have independent members that are trusted, that are professional, experienced, objective advisors to the council. They are volunteers. They're people who give up their time that are chosen to be independent, to be objective. And that's difficult to get. Sometimes I think we've had difficulties getting independent. They are independent. What you're saying is that after 4 years they lose their independence. That they lose their experience. They lose their trust. They lose their objective assessment. They don't. What you're saying is, if I understand it, is that you believe that the independent members become biased. They become predetermined to their views because of sitting over a period of time. That cannot be right. And quite frankly, I think without fear or favour, the independent members are there to be independent. I think it's an absurdity. I like to say that, I mean, I don't know, I can say, I don't know who the independent members are that one is talking about, but I would like to say that they are volunteers, they are selected on trust, experience and objective values, and I'd like to say that I welcome their contribution, and I hope that they will continue, and I hope this type of nonsense of hope to change someone every 4 years because of a perceived bias or undermining, unless there's real evidence that you have that shows that person is no longer independent, we carry on as we are. I think it's absurd just to go out, waste council money again. You'd have another committee on it. You know, waste money. Let's just do it for the waste. Unless you've got objective evidence why that is not working, I'm not voting for it.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dance has pinched a few points for me, but I think the point I want to make is they do an excellent job. If you don't hear about these independent officers, you're clearly doing something right. And for people to come forward and give up their time and actually understand how local government works, it's not a case of coming to the council chamber, having a whip telling you what to do. You have to learn and understand how local government actually works. And for people to give up their time and to be under the understanding that they'll be gone in 4 years, I think, Mr. Mayor, is rather unfair. And they're not here tonight to be able to speak up for themselves. And Councillor Dad's absolutely right about spending the money on the advertising in the paper. You know, we all know about the issues like the overgrown bushes and the like, or maybe a dump of asbestos that I've got cleared in the Great Gregory. But the point is, money doesn't grow on trees, and we should value every penny the taxpayer has paid. So I'll be voting against this amendment and voting for the original document being put before us tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Bagley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a bit of a disturbing pattern emerging in the UKIP side now. I mean, I put it down originally to an element of naivety and inexperience of local government, but now it's quite clear that the UKIP way is to wait until the last possible minute for anything and then try and trash it and come up with another solution. Now, it's not as if, given that it's a 4-year plan here, that people didn't know that at some point we were going to have a meeting in order to determine what we do with the 4 independents and to leave it until the latest hour. So what happens now? We have no committee while we're actually going out to advertising. We say, oh, thank you very much, committee members, but tell you what, you're only here for a couple of weeks until we can advertise somewhere else. And that's predisposed that, in fact, that members of the public will come forward when we spend the money on the advertising. And anybody that actually works closely with the local community in the voluntary sector will know that over time it's becoming more and more difficult to actually attract people that actually want to give up their time in certain areas. And this is one of those things that I wonder how many people are sitting at home right now thinking, if only there's an advert for us to be able to go and sit at the council and do a joint standards committee. It's ludicrous. Now what I do agree, and what I think is laudable, is the idea that you should have fresh faces, but far more sensible to say, let's have some sort of recruitment programme that is ongoing and organic, so that if people were to retire or get tired of it or want a break, that there is fresh blood coming through. But to leave it till the 11th hour, which is the UKIP way, and then expect everything to stop just because they don't like it, is just bizarre and ludicrous, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It pains me always to have to correct Councillor Baggott, because I do it so often, but the voluntary sector has never been thriving. There has never been so many people who want to volunteer and take part. And you know, there's some gentle spin going on from the Conservative benches. It's great to watch, because the idea that in a borough of almost 200,000 people, there are only 4 independent, objective and trustworthy individuals who could possibly do the role of independent persons is, I think, frankly, utterly ludicrous. So I would just ask you, if it goes out to the public and we have this procedure, and I speak, Mr. Mayor, and many people in the room will know with some extensive experience on the standards board. So I've been there, I met these people, I probably know them all by name if I care to recall, but Councillor Dadson, I'm sure you would agree. But what I would say is that the 4 people just nodding through their reappointment to me doesn't seem right, because they do play an important role on this council. Because if an officer or if a elected member is before that standards committee, it's for a very real reason, a very, in most cases, sometimes it's a political reason, but they have to make very difficult judgments. And I know that some of the salacious claims that people put against us or against me in the past have been thrown out because of conversations with independent people. So they do play an important role. But I don't think that it's right that we just nod through, because they are responsible for reputations both of officers and of councillors. So I don't see what we have to be scared of by putting it out. There's this idea that we're wasting taxpayers' money. I would say it again probably for like the 1000th time since I've been a councillor. We have a £500,000 a year Marcons team that operate out of this council. If we cannot get adverts and messaging out there with a £500,000 Marcons team, then maybe the Marcons team shouldn't be there, because they're probably not doing their job very well. So this is not about demonising people, it's about being open and transparent, it's about doing the right thing. And I have to say, I'm concerned that the administration doesn't believe that there are more independent, trustworthy and objective people in our borough. That is a cause of real concern. And I would urge you to support this amendment so that we can do this in the right way.
Right, I've got 3 more speakers on the amendment, then we'll take the vote on the amendment. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, well, this is really disheartening, and shame on you, Councillor Callaghan. Shame on you. Shame on you. There's no spin coming from these benches. The spin is coming from their side. Is this how you run your council? Is this how you want to spend taxpayers' money? Forget the Marcons debate. There is a real cost behind this. Open and transparency. Is that how you dress this up to get it through? And what plausible excuse can you have for getting rid of the 4 members that are already there? Now, I don't know who they are, and I don't want to, because they are independent. But this smacks of gerrymandering. at a cost to the taxpayer. And isn't it wonderful, Mr Mayor, how this unholy coalition joined together to dish it up? Vote UKIP, you will get Labour. And they're not even close to a majority.
Having just spoken
They're not even close to a majority. You've got 9 and 10. Yet they seek to abuse taxpayers' money and the public purse in this way. And for what reason? I mean, God forbid you ever get to go in front of the standards board. Because all they can do is make you say sorry. We're doing business with ourselves here. It doesn't put residents or a community in any way does it improve their life. Not a single job. Not an quota. Yeah, I would do. And here's the reason why. Because this gerrymandering is so that we can have these just insane standards boards inquiry. You can't say boo to a member without them putting you through the standards process. Every time they do, there's a cost. It's officer time, officer cost, it's a panel, and this, you know, how many times have we stood here when we've had the deputy mayor's chain? Yeah, that is good value by comparison to what we're talking about here. Because as soon as you go out for advert, we're talking thousands of pounds. Tell me where the resident benefits in that process. And Councillor Callaghan, you look at yourself in the mirror when you're siding with that lot over there, trying to gerrymander this process. This process should just be kept aside. It is there for a reason. We shouldn't be looking to enhance it. We should be looking to avoid it. That's what members should do. There are so many things that we can do in this time of austerity. Yet here we are talking about 4 members. Gerrymandering a process so that should a Conservative come up in front of this this so-called independent panel, they'll be held to right. That's what this is about, Mr Mayor. And Councillor Callaghan, I've really had more respect for you. Really had more respect. Mr Mayor, chuck this thing out, chuck this motion out. You should go back on this motion and withdraw it. It's not worthy. It's not worthy of this council. It's not worthy of you. Do away with it. Let's get on with business. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. I can see when you were speaking, Councillor Hillier, who's due to speak, Councillor Sargent, both nodding in total agreement, so I'm sure that their input is now going to be very, very brief. Councillor Hillier.
It always was going to be brief, Mr Mayor.
First of all, Councillor Sargent.
First of all, this does seem like change for change's sake, nothing more than that. There is, in saying, as the amendment does, to replace those people, it does say that if one of those independent people wanted to reapply to stand on there, they wouldn't be allowed to, and that is ludicrous. And by all accounts, from what has been said by other members, this isn't broke. And what ain't broke, don't need fixing.
Councillor Sargent.
It won't be short.
It will. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Is this how this council now works? That everything that we want to do, we bring to council? In fact, the officers that actually service this committee, I feel it's insulting. Because we have processes and procedures that we go through to formulate these reviews. If there needed to be a review of the Standards Committee, which would include the existing independent persons, why was that not spoken by the whole committee and the officers could have taken that up? Why do you bring it to full council and expect that change to happen just like that? Because that's the only way that you want to operate, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, and I've got the floor. Maybe you could repeat it when I sit down. But I don't like the way that this works. It's not right, and it's not following the council's constitution. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
We now move to a vote. We now move to a vote on the amendment. I'll read it out again so it's quite clear. That the council reappoints the 4 independent persons on the Joint Standard Committee for the remainder of the municipal year and undertakes to to recruit 4 new independent persons for a 4-year term. All those in favour, please show.
Shameful.
Thank you. All those against, please show. Right, the amendment defeated. Go back to I've read these up now. 1923. Right, let's go to Mr. Daz. Right, we now move to the recommendations on page 87. There's no more speakers. We now go to the vote on the recommendations, which are that the existing 4 independent persons on the Joint Standards Committee be reappointed for a further 4-year term, and that the requirement for members on certain committees to have received appropriate training be extended to the Employment and General Purposes Committee when determining employment-related matters, and that the Constitution be amended accordingly. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Councillor Cannon, are you voting? That's 1923. Thank you. We will now have a 20-minute break.